Yeah, I was, and I am very excited to kick this off and to see how we co-create our experience together tonight, today, this morning, depending on where we are. And it's also the first time, I think, Bev and James, we're working in the threeness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
sharing it out there for us all to be aware of, perhaps. Yeah, so, you know, our aim is, of course, to touch on intersubjectivity, and as we always aim for, to work in a co-creative manner. So as Paul always says, I have his words in my mind, you know, we planned for something and let's see what will come out and what will emerge and what will arise. So why don't we do a short roundtable, you know, saying just our names, and what else did we want to cover? Did we want to touch on, Bev and James? Our names, and
I think it was just to say, sort of get our name in, put our name in the space, because you know, we've got things to do. So and we're going to do some group work, aren't we? And then come back together. So probably we'll get to know each other more then.
Yeah.
So I think it's just to say hi, and kind of, it's sort of like joining with your voice, which does something, doesn't it?
Yeah, an invite to come in the space.
Yeah, nice. Do you want to say, what do you want to say? How are you bringing yourself in, Traian? Or have you done that?
this time I want to say hi. I'm Traian, and happy to be here. Nothing else.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bev, and yeah, looking forward to what emerges.
I'm James. I'm really looking forward to being with you all this evening.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm living in Suffolk. I know Paul and Debs very well. Been with them for a few years, and I'm just starting my CTA now. Education's my interest.
Hi, I'm Freddie. I'm a high school math and special education teacher. Looking forward to this afternoon.
I'm Joanna, and I'm checking in after a day of clients, so this feels like a luxury of connection in a different space.
Welcome.
Okay.
I'm Laura. I'm quite a fresh cookie. I'm just graduating in TA, and I don't know, something about this workshop really drew me in, so I'm curious about that. So I'm interested to find out what emerges.
I'm Amy, and I'm also interested to see what emerges this evening.
Hi, I'm sorry, you can't see. I put some light on here. Hi, I'm Anne. I'm a training TA, and yeah, I was curious to see what this conference was about, and I'm very interested in it, and so happy to join you all over the world.
Yeah.
I live in Yorkshire, by the way.
I'm Claire, I'll come in. I've been delayed at school, so I was hoping, I'm a teacher, and I was hoping to get back in time for this to start, but I've been delayed at school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my camera off, if that's okay, for the first bit, and listen in while I'm driving home very carefully. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be here. I'm finding out more and more about co-creative TA with these workshops, and yeah, I think I might have accidentally done some co-creative TA work with my therapist yesterday. So I've had a real life experience of it yesterday. And yeah, I've just graduated, so I've been starting in private practice since September. So yeah, I will join you all a bit later on.
Okay.
Forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Hi, and drive safely.
Hi, I'm Simona. I'm a researcher, and intersubjectivity is very important to my program. What I'm looking into. I've also just started training to become a psychotherapist. I need to do something from 6 o'clock, so if that's okay, I'll put my camera on from then on, but we're deep in and out listening to what's happening, if that's all right. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hannah and I am training and just hi Bev and interested to see what tonight's all about and listening and learning.
Nice to see you, Hannah.
Hasn't checked in.
Hi, I'm Alan Wardle. I'm sorry I was a bit late, kind of day job finishing. I am currently a third year TA student at TA East in East London, and I did one of the webinars with Keith and Graham when it was a few weeks ago, and I thought it was very interesting, so I thought I would have signed up to one of this to find out a bit more. I thought it was very interesting, so I'm looking forward to hearing more and being here and taking part. Thank you.
Welcome. And there were others joining. So for those, we're doing a round table, sharing our name and whatever we find relevant to bring in the group.
Have we heard from Serena and Claire?
I
heard from Claire,
don't
but
think
not from
so.
Serena.
Serena, no, because she just joined.
She's muted at the moment.
Serena, can you hear us?
Hi, sorry, I've just logged in. Sorry, I'm late.
No worries.
No worries.
Is it okay to have my camera off? Or do you want to see me?
I think it'd be good to see you.
Okay, yeah.
If possible. I think there's something about that, isn't there? About when we're working in the intersubjective space, it's like something important about seeing each other for me, I think. Other people might have a different idea to that.
Hi, Serena.
Hi.
Me and Sweeney and Traian together. We're training in the same institute.
Yeah. Sorry, you're just on the settee, so I'm just trying to get I've just rushed in and logged in.
No worries whatsoever. Great. It feels very different when you can see someone. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really important to have you in the space.
Yeah.
It is different.
Yeah.
It's a very much talked about topic in organizations now, you know.
Oh yeah, what camera on or off, Traian? That.
Yeah, camera on or off. And what does that do to the attachment that people feel to the organization?
What an interesting idea.
It does something to it. We might touch on it.
It does, and I think
just resonated with it.
It leaves a space for a fantasy somehow about what's going on behind that screen for me.
Yeah, and it's something about presence too, isn't it?
Yeah.
How are we present, and how are we present with others?
It's a good point. So I think we heard from everyone now, didn't we?
Yeah. Have you said enough, Serena?
I believe so.
You're the last one.
I just there might be an interruption because my son is going to be dropped off soon, so I might have to I don't know, switch my camera off or see to him when he comes home. Would that be okay with people?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy I saw you, and you know, depending on what you need to do, what you need to deal with, it's fine. But I'm happy we got the chance to connect. So Bev and James.
I think we go to James, don't we?
Let's kick off our plan.
And you might. I want to say something about the fact that we're working together, the three of us, with you, and we do a lot of work as a six, but we haven't worked as a 3. And so there will be an emerging process live between us as well.
Oh. Oh. And there'll be in the process between us all, because
Exactly.
what we want to introduce you to today is not, the content is intersubjectivity, obviously, but we also want to make this a co-creative space for you, and then to see what emerges as we reflect on co-creativity and bring you into that process. So what I would like to do with you now is just to run through with you the principles of co-creative TA, and then we might look at some other things, okay? And sort of feel free to comment, bring yourselves in, talk about the impact on you. Yeah.
I'll check the chat. If you want to put your hand up, that's okay. If you'd rather put in the chat, that's okay. And I'll keep an eye.
Yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, when I'm talking, okay to interrupt, and you know, if there's something that needs to be said, say it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Bring yourself in. So, do you going to put up the?
Sure.
Triangle. Yeah.
Okay. Here we are.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. So there's four principles in co-creative TA, and they create a container for the work we do. And the first is we-ness, which is about us being okay in relationship with each other. And it is something quite special in a way, because within TA, of course, we quite often see we-ness symbiotically in a pathological way. And that's not what we're talking about. This is a we-ness where we bring ourselves into the space, and so that we potentially have access to each other and all that we can bring, because we're all adults and we've all got loads of experience, and you know, the three of us only know what we know. So there's something really important about being present, all of you, with us. And as a group, responsibility is shared. It's not equal, because I think there'll be aspects of responsibility that Bev Gibbons and I might have, but it's very much, it is a shared responsibility. You know, for example, if there was something that you were concerned about safety, you might normally think, well, that's for Traian, Bev and James to sort out. But I would sort of suggest, you know, it's absolutely okay for you to bring yourselves in and talk about it. That's absolutely okay. And it's really important, again, for you to find your own potency within this group and to watch what you get up to in it. Yeah. And present-centeredness is a key part of co-creative TA, because it's where we're in adult, working with each other in an adult perspective all the time, of course, keeping a weather eye on our capacity to slip out of adult. That's either one, or perhaps we could all slip out of adult, but it's really important to notice our patterns and our feelings and what's going on for us. And the final aspect I want to talk about is something that Paul Robinson contributed. The first 3 came from Tudor and Summers, but Paul contributed respect and unconditional positive regard, which many of you might recognize comes from Carl Rogers. And this is really important. And this is, again, embodying the, you know, I'm okay, you're okay. Others are okay, and the world's okay. And that's really important for us all within this process, and for us to notice that. So, is this very unfamiliar to any of you? Or I know some of you, so I know it will be familiar to you, and others I don't know, and it might not be. So, I'll move on, and you can interrupt if you need to. Do you want to go up a bit, Traian?
Sure. And Bev, did you want to add something here, or it was?
Well, something was coming to mind, and it was when you were talking about we-ness, James. It sort of reminded me that I think in co-creative TA invites us to challenge that kind of exactly what you said, James, that we-ness can equal symbiosis and can equal pathology. Actually, we're talking about interdependence. We're talking about when something is, it's something about a willingness to be we, to hold we and to hold me.
Yeah, and I guess what goes with that then, Bev, is the willingness to be present and as I've heard you often say, be present in a non-defensive way.
Yeah.
If we can, and of course, we can't always.
Well, and then we get into that idea of being in the realm of two coexisting realities that are happening at the same time, and how we can tolerate that. Yeah. And so there's the word commitment, and we say that word, don't we? Because I think it is a commitment to staying with that.
Yes, that's really true. Yeah, and that's what we're inviting you all to do today, to be with us in a committed way. So if you drop down a bit, Traian, I'll just run through some permissions for you, and then we'll think just briefly about a contract. So the permissions, and this relates again to the we-ness, it's okay for us, you, me, to be ourselves, yourself, myself. It's okay to be who you are. And it's okay to be aware of and to account for, to share our past, including our thoughts and feelings, whether past or present centered, that's okay. And it's okay to learn what we want to learn and to ask for it. We're all adults here, and we're all here to learn, and that includes Traian, Bev and I. And, I invite you, if there's something you want, you need, that you ask for it. And it's okay to challenge if we don't agree. It's okay to share a different learning, different perspective, even if it means challenging one of the three of us, because actually we don't know everything. Okay, you have
thank God.
Yeah, thank God. And you have unique experiences that nobody else has access to. So we all have, lots to contribute. And again, it's okay to change, be different to how we've been or who we've been in the past, and to rewrite our future and our past. Yeah. And so I'd like us to sort of, agree, that we'll work together, we'll work and learn together, all of us. We'll share responsibility for the learning to take place. And that only happens when we're all willing to engage with each other. Because that's really, because we all have so much to contribute, and we'll willingly bring our own knowledge and experiences into the room and share them, which will enable and support our learning and the learning of others. Yeah. And we'll learn in the present, noticing and accounting for past experiences that might get in the way of our learning. And finally, to reiterate the fourth principle, we'll treat ourselves and others with respect and unconditional mutual positive regard. And of course, we will keep confidential personal stories. Is everybody happy to work with that as a sort of a way of going forward with the rest of this evening? Are you okay about that? Yeah. So I can hand back to you, Bev.
Thanks, James. Yeah, I really like that, and I wonder whether so what we're planning to do to share that with everyone is for us, three of us, to have a conversation for 10 minutes about what intersubjectivity means for us. And as we do that, we're going to see if some common threads come out that kind of capture, because what we find out is every time we talk about it, something different comes out. And it occurred to me also to ask everyone how it was to hear those principles and to sort of sign up to them. And is it different to other times when you've signed up to doing learning, or is it the same? Or is there any difference about it?
I'll share something. I think for me, the difference is the opportunity to create something as part of the group rather than be present for the learning. I am part of the learning. And that is an open invitation as we go along. I love, James, when you said like you can interrupt me as I go along. It's almost like there's a structure, but there are no rules.
That's not the way I'm putting it.
Yeah.
And that structure is safe for us to explore together.
Yeah.
And that feels different.
It is.
Yeah. That's really true.
It's freedom within the space that we co-create. And we even co-create the rules that we work with, play with, and learn with.
And I imagine if I turn up for another one, those rules will be different because there'll be a different set of people, or we'll bring something different to the space, possibly.
Yeah, I think there might be something in common, which is the willingness, because I wrote it down. I really like this word that came up in your discussion, Bev and James. The willingness to be present, to work in the intersubjective space, to be non-defensive. That willingness, I think, is a common aspiration in co-creativity.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's right. And to share with everybody that we met for half an hour before we came to be with you, and we had an interesting process where we sort of had a bit of a different expectations about what would happen. And I was reflecting that sometimes between James and me, we can really go there a little bit with grittiness and like and try on not so much. And we were talking about this, and what I've learned through doing this, particularly with you, James, is it's fine when in fine weather it's okay, but I found the courage to disagree, and this is so valuable and precious, and to be able to say, well, that's not what I thought, and to know that the other person's going to stay there. I think it's that commitment that when things get difficult, to stay and become part of a solution together.
Yeah, I think that's the gift of working co-creatively, with the willingness to be present irrespective of what might get triggered. Because it's in the intersubjective space that you can actually create something new.
Yeah.
And so Bev and I know each other to an extent, and we know this can happen, and it can be explored.
Yeah.
And that's the richness of it.
It really is.
And that's where there's, I don't know how to put it, learning's not quite the right word, because I feel very close to Bev, and there's a closeness engendered by that broken openness to what might happen.
Yeah, well said. It really is. So shall we talk a bit about what intersubjectivity is for us?
Yeah.
I think we're already doing it to a degree.
We're doing it, but I sort of because James and I are psychotherapists as well. It's always interesting for me, anyway, to hear from you, Traian, because of your organisational perspective. Which is
I'd like to just say something.
Go ahead, go for it, Jenny.
Go for it, Jenny.
My first question was going to be, could you explain what intersubjectivity is? Because I looked it up and I was none the wiser. So I'm really hoping that will evolve from your three perspectives.
Let's see.
Let's see. Yeah.
Because there's something about it that there's loads of theory written about it, but it is a lived experience too.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And
that's why it's that's why it's sometimes, because we were talking about the organizational space and organizations, there is this habit of explaining prior to a workshop or training what you're going to deliver. And sometimes, you know, delivering, not really delivering, but creating or working from these co-creative principles, it's hard to explain prior to the experience. So the same with the definition. So let's see what emerges from our dialogue. And I'm curious to see what you believe, think, and how does that resonate with you tonight?
Well, I don't know if you actually said what intersubjectivity is for you, Traian.
No, I haven't. And there are so many things that I could say about it. I was reflecting on it also today. And for me, intersubjectivity is the core of people coming together. And in the work that I do, they come together in organizations. And that core, that intersubjectivity exists all the time. So that's a given. Whether we account for it, whether we make use of it, whether we are willing to step into it, for me, that's what makes the difference between healthy or thriving places of work, thriving, you know, management relationships, thriving peers working together. And to be more, perhaps even more specific, for me, it's this willingness to be vulnerable and, you know, to step into the space of the two-ness or at the team level. The way I think we're still going through that, and I think we're changing, and I think co-creativity definitely plays a role. The way organizations many times are shaped are through hierarchies, which are fine, they have a scope, but that sets a certain invitation for people to be in a certain way. Many times, what I usually work towards is facilitate almost like a de-learning process of people to be together in a different way for this intersubjectivity to be accounted. And sometimes it's process, sometimes it's even, you know, offering feedback or sharing openly what the other one has to say or bring in. So many times it comes across as simple because it's quite natural as an emergent process. And we need to learn to let it be. And one thing that I wanted to add also was, you know, Byrne talks about in his writings about groups tend to focus on the process more than on the work when the process gets in the way. So for me, this striving towards working co-creatively and finding the intersubjective space between us is a very hands-on approach to effective being together in teams and groups and getting results, because that's many times key, I think, especially in organizational work. How can we get results through this different way of being? Anyway, I'll stop because I'd love to build together on this.
Anne?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I work with in schools, with different age group children, and I'm very lucky because I work in very small groups, like 3 or 4 or 1 or 2. And so I really work in this co-creativity work. And I think this year I really introduced co-creativity work with my younger ones. And it's so much more interesting for everyone. And it brings, it works so much better. Everyone is so much more involved and happy, and it's great for everyone, I think, and it brings so much to everyone. And I remember once it was my first year at school, and I remember it was just before Easter holiday, and I had the year 11 group and said, let's talk about Easter today. So what do we know about Easter? And just starting with one word like that, it was so interesting because all these different persons from different backgrounds and origins and everything. And it has been, I think, the most interesting lesson we had, because we just everyone brought his bit, and yeah, it was amazing. And it was a total core creativity lesson. It was amazing.
Yeah, because even children have so much to bring.
They bring so much, yeah.
No, that's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something comes up for me in terms of intersubjectivity, going by what's been said as well, that makes me think about our ability to tolerate the other's difference. So, you know, it's about when there's me and there's you. So there's me and there's you, and then in the middle of me and you is this space where we can find a different person. We find, you know, in the intersubjective space, I am the other's other. I am other to you. Myself, my being is other to you, and yourself and being is other to me. And what happens when I really let myself meet that difference? It's like there's a two-way street, and we've got to navigate it.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to an aspect of it, for me, of intersubjectivity, which is there's something really important about seeing somebody else empathically recognize us. And that's part of being the other's other.
Yeah.
And it's deeply important. And I think, and it brings up something that Tudor talks about, because philosophically, it shifts the work of therapy. I think it shifts the work of relationship from what the therapist, if you like, the person who has the power is doing, to actually what the client or the other is doing. Because that's the work that becomes important. And of course, it's two-way.
Yeah.
So it's shared. So this is very much, you know, we talk in psychotherapy about a two-person psychology, and it's also a two-person plus psychology, because not only is as Bev showed you, the ball, the space between, but there's also the space that surrounds us all.
Yeah.
So there is our external context as well. And that is also important. We all, when we come together, each of us come together today with very differing contexts.
Yeah. And James, at the same time, when I'm in a relational encounter with you, with everybody here, I'm also in a continuous process of experiencing reality via past templates, as well as being present. So there's the old records, as I call them, or script, or whatever you want to call it, going on. And aren't we always doing this being present, and the sound of the old record there as well?
Yeah, and that was going back to sort of that present-centeredness and the need to keep an eye on that part of us that slips back into the past and brings it into the present, and how that can then become, as you know, as you talk about, Bev, a grittiness in relationship in what's going on. And it is being attentive to that.
And what Tudor and Summers say, don't they, is that those shifts in self are kind of that material is available in the intersubjective space for us both to get interested in.
Well, I think the joy of it for me is when we're willing to allow it to be present in there, that it is co-created, and there is a creation going on, that possibilities emerge, because we can then play with it and make meaning of it in a way that's really positive. Whereas if we retreat into defensive places, we just remain with ourselves and we lose what we gain from being together.
I think that what you're saying, James, links me back to you, Traian, where you said that in organisations, it may be that it's almost like the room of intersubjectivity isn't gone into, so the opportunity is lost. And do you think that's because it feels scary for people?
Yeah, I think that the scare is a bit deeper and a bit hidden. What we cover it with many times in different groups, organizations, is through different roles, different mandates, different entities that we imagine ourselves to be in. And of course, what you're talking about is how can we let that go? Part of it that let that go and come into the intersubjective space. And if we dig deeper to your point, yes, I think it's care of the unknown, because what would I be without the custom pattern of doing management like I used to? Because James, you were talking about a different type of relating. Well, I would say that co-creativity invites into a different type of leadership.
Yeah, it does.
It's not. I think that the positive challenge is to invite people into the intersubjective space and for them to realize that they're gaining more than they might have thought they would lose if they would step in. And for me, many times, especially in group work, it's the tension between belonging and individuality.
Yeah.
And many times individuality is prioritized. We call it leadership development. We call it individual focused type of development. And for me, how do we develop in parallel to this as a group? And for me, this is key. The intersubjective space is what's fostering this type of development. Yes. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be nice. It doesn't mean that it's going to be positive or feel good all the time. It's about, again, coming back to the willingness. And something that I wanted to add is the willingness to be authentic. Up until recently, actually, before the three of us were talking about this workshop, I was calling it honesty. And I think authenticity is a better word. And the authenticity is a co-created process.
Yes.
I cannot go into the relationship and say, I'll be fully honest. I don't know. Help me, help you, help us be present-centered and find edges of inauthenticity. For me, that's really important.
Can I add something to that? I was thinking what you've just been saying and picking up on something that you said, Bev, was that it's about tolerating difference. And in some ways, then I think about intersubjectivity as we have to honor difference, because it's only through your difference to me that I'm going to see where I'm impacted most, where I'm being inauthentic. Yeah. So it's almost like we have to shift from tolerating to accepting to honoring difference and really respecting that. That's what's going to help me most to grow and heal and change. And maybe in a therapeutic or organizational way, educational way, it's the same.
Yes, I think that's true. I think, isn't this how we learn who we are?
Yeah. I think the disturbance of the encounter with other reveals me to me as much as it reveals the other to me.
Yeah.
I think it takes courage. as well.
Yeah.
It does. But I think there's something very special when you can see yourself in the eyes of the other.
Yeah.
You get then a completely different perspective. And it's part of that intersubjective space. And I think that's what goes on developmentally for babies. They get to know who they are through the eyes of their mother or their primary caregiver if you move away from that.
It puts me in mind of, you know, Heather Fowley talks about the feared and yet longed for relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
About, I want that, but oh no, I better not, I don't, but I do, but I don't. If I go there, what am I going to find out and what's going to happen?
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah. You know, many times when you ask people why were you into being part of that group or organizational, and they many times say, I don't know, it just felt good. There aren't many words attached to it. And again, you know, in organizations, we put a lot of emphasis on surveys and KPIs and so on. But the core of it is, I link it to what Bern was talking when he was talking about intimacy. Where I disagree a bit with Bern is he called it quite rare. I agree there. But for me, intersubjectivity is closely linked to intimacy. The intersubjectivity has an intimate quality to it. And that's how I connect the two. I think Bern, you know, quite a few years back, had a bit of a different take to how available intimacy is to all of us. I'm a bit more optimistic these days than perhaps he was.
So as we've been talking, I've written down things like letting go and risk and courage, disturbance and authenticity. That's involved in making use of the intersubjective space. So that's kind of a little bit of what's emerged from our conversation. And I think that I'm right that we were going to invite people into small groups to talk about what for you, what does intersubjectivity mean for you? What does it evoke in you? So we have these three questions really that you might not want to bother with, but you might be helpful. Like what does intersubjectivity mean for you? What does it evoke in you? And what's your experience been of it? Or anything else that comes up for you? And so as you talk, if themes emerge that are commonalities and common threads, that would be great to hear about as well as anything else you want to share. Is that okay for everyone?
Yeah, and the slide about the contract back on the screen, as I missed that earlier. Thank you.
Yep. This is it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. So you spend a bit of time reflecting on what intersubjectivity is for you. What emerged? What's relevant? What's something that you'd like to bring in the wider group?
Something about permission to give ourselves the opportunity to be vulnerable, to permit other people to be vulnerable. For me, permission seemed an important part of being able to be productive in this intersubjective space.
Permission. Who gives the permissions?
Sorry, were you asking me a question?
Yeah, Jenny, I was just sort of thinking, okay, so who gives the permission?
I think we give ourselves permission.
Yeah, And what's involved? What would be involved in that for you?
Taking a risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And being able to trust the environment I was in.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about that, Jenny, as well. The context. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't mind sharing a personal example of that actually from this process. That when I first logged onto it and saw it was quite an intimate small group, straight away my initial reaction was retreat. So I nearly closed down Zoom and left the group. So I'm glad I stayed. And the thing that shifted for me was the permissions in the contract to, the permission to kind of be you, that your stuff's there, your history is there, because it's not going to disappear, but to account for that, but also account for that and be present. And as soon as I read those, I felt quite different and able to kind of be here. Yeah, and I'm glad I've named it as well, because it was distracting. And as you were talking about earlier, actually, in the discussion about how it limits your learning, that defensiveness stops you kind of being able to absorb stuff as well. Yeah,
because it evokes all that past experiences of learning that have gone horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that impact on others to hear that from Laura?
I love the fact that you're able to share it with us, Laura, and I love the process you went through. So you didn't immediately withdraw, but you did give yourself permission to spend a bit longer. And interestingly, I have an inverse relationship, that if I'm in a very big group, I don't want to be part of it.
Wow.
Interesting. I mean, I don't withdraw, but I would like to withdraw.
Yeah, because there's a little bit in there about catching past I and staying in the present.
There is.
And staying with the past I also. So staying in the present and accounting for what comes from the past I.
So integrating.
Yeah, integrating is the present centeredness, which doesn't always imply to be an adult, but to account for where we are and what pulls us in a different direction than what would be needed in the here and now, what would be useful for us to step into the intersubjective space. And Laura, your example is so great.
It is.
You had that moment of decision. And you said, well, not tonight.
And it's making me think about the contribution of the sharing of humanness and what that contributes in the intersubjective space, or how it facilitates it. Anyway.
Is it a sort of recognition, Bev? Recognizing something familiar in the other one, or?
Well, I guess so, because I suppose with what Laura said, I suppose that's like someone, when you read those permissions, it's like somebody already thought of that. So that must mean that somebody else would find that useful.
Yeah.
So I get mirrored back to me something about it's okay, it's okay to be nervous here, or to feel uncomfortable, or that's something else. Someone else has spotted that and thought about it, felt it.
Maybe the unspoken bit in all of that stuff that I did at the beginning is that this isn't a judging space. Quite mindful of an old Sufi poem that says, this isn't a courthouse. This is a caravan and we're on a journey.
Would anyone else be willing to share what emerged for you in your groups?
I think for me, I said hello to everybody, and then everyone kind of held the silence. And I thought, oh, what should I say? Because I'm not very experienced and I'm a trainee. I don't know who all these other people are. And I was like, so who's going first? And no one answered me. And then I was like, oh, I suppose I'm going to go first then because I've spoken up. And I just kind of, during the break, I was like, oh, I mean, as I'm talking now, I'm feeling quite red and hot. So I think there's something around that for me about not knowing or feel like I have to get it right or just something. But it was nice to share and hear the other people's experiences of it as well and learn and also have, similar experiences. And
So I'm really glad to hear that it didn't continue to be silent.
No, it didn't continue to be silent.
Yeah. There were answers and there was, yeah.
I want to add to the back of that because we were in a group together, and my experience was of the excitement of the shared meaning that you brought because you started first, I don't know, whatever, because of the questions you asked. And part of what I see as the intersubjectivity is the language and the meaning making. So I'm really moved by hearing your meaning making, because my meaning making was, oh, that was good. That was really interesting. And I hadn't noticed that you were a trainee, or how, I can't remember how you just described yourself there. It was more, oh, you've gone first, and that's given us somewhere to build, and not even build from, something to emerge from that. And that was my noticing of, oh, I loved how we made meaning through language, and you brought a lot of that language through your curiosity.
What a great example, because you had the meeting of two different realities. And you can stay in them, or you can let that go and find out what happens together. Serena, you had an idea, maybe you had an idea of what other people's idea of you would be. Something like that. And it's then not that. And it's like, can we let go of that and be with what is?
Yeah, I guess it's letting go of those sort of labels we use for ourselves and for other people and how we place ourselves. And yet we're a group of people meeting together. And as I said at the beginning, we're all adults. We all have lots to contribute. So and yet, of course, you know, as you said, Serena, you had the experience of thinking, oh my goodness, you know, I haven't got as much experience, and therefore somehow I might be judged for who I am.
Oh, I would add to that too, actually. I think I shared in the group that I wrote a lot about co-creativity in my CTA, and almost when I'm with somebody who's in training, I fear being judged because I've forgotten most of it. And I think, oh, you're going to know what I've forgotten. You know, so I don't think that's very present, but it is in the past eye of what will you think if I get it wrong?
And I like about this example that we were talking about the missed opportunities and resources that we don't facilitate by not joining the intersubjective space. And look how much we know, aside from being CTA, TA practitioner, TA advanced, whatever we call ourselves. I was wondering if, when you reflect of your experience joining into the breakout room and moving out of the breakout room, do you notice a difference for yourself or to the space that you were in? Did anything change through the dialogue and discussion on intersubjectivity that you had?
Traian, do you mean, is it different for people talking in the small groups to talking in the big group?
No, that also, what I'm more inviting people to reflect on, how was it when you got into the room, and how was it when, you know, the invitation was just wrapped up and you were moving out back into the wider group? When you look back at your own experience, is there anything that comes up when you reflect on the space of how you were, what you learned? Because I think I'm asking that because many times for me it's also the space that we co-create, which many times is palpable. The space of trust, the space that's what I'm hinting towards.
Okay.
And yeah. So
I noticed that when we come out of the breakout room, so there's the countdown. It's like, do we leave now, or do we go? Or do we let the count just go and kick us out? And then I was like, okay, we're sharing in the big group. So that was actually quite a private space, really, because it was just the four of us. So what can I share? What's mine, and not, I don't want to share what anyone else is. So that's kind of what came up for me. So knowing that space is actually, even if it's online and it's a breakout room, it is a different shift to then coming into a bigger group. For me.
Yeah, it is.
I can notice as I'm looking at all the faces on the screen, having been in the group, how I feel more connected to the faces I was in the breakout room with. That there's some now familiarity and connection in 20 minutes of us sharing.
Yeah, I was a bit like Laura in terms of like it being a small group and that being quite intimidating, because you're more able to be seen within that small group. And then if we're in a small group that's been put into smaller groups within the small group, it was like, oh, I definitely don't want that. But then within just a second of being in there, I didn't want to leave and come back to the big group. I wanted to stay. So it's like that real shift of like not wanting to go in, but going with it, and then not wanting to leave. Coming back, experiencing that.
It took a risk. With some risk there. Yeah,
there was. Sounded quite a roller coaster, really.
What a great definition of intersubjectivity, I would say. Lived intersubjectivity, which is, oh, okay. I don't want to go. That's what I was mentioning.
I don't want to go. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, no, I don't.
You know, it's that tension, and we remember, I think, those moments, and those people and those teams, groups that we've been part of.
I think you're capturing, Claire, there something about that. What Tudor and Summers talk about as the shifts in experiencing from past I to present I, and that kind of like, oh, I didn't want to do that, but I'm doing it now, and bringing it into awareness, and something happens then.
Yeah.
And then I think it gets strengthened and sort of compounded by other people, like what you were saying, James, about other people mirroring back something to us as well. And you're doing it for them.
Coming together. It is a coming together.
And your question, Traian, for me, so I don't know whether this is the third or fourth one that I've attended, and there's something around the intersubjectivity across the different ones. So, you know, Claire arriving, and we were in breakouts last time. So there's a familiarity. I guess it's around a safety. So as I've been vulnerable in past sessions, I've taken something from it. Because we have we've worked in that space in the past. So then I don't know, it's kind of reaping the reward.
Yeah.
But the safety, I guess for the level, what am I saying? The level of vulnerability initially, the reward seems to have come very quickly.
Yeah. It's a brilliant example of a past I, a recent past I that you know, facilitates or invites to a different way of joining the group. What a great example.
And we need the past I to provide us with something to compare. So it's like that, the past I shows us the change, doesn't it? Does that make sense? Like when we notice that we didn't want to, or we were frightened, and then we do it, and something different happens. Can you? Yeah.
Well, I just wonder whether there's something about it's a past positive I, and it's part of integrating adult. And sounds to me like Amy's using her experience in the here and now to enable to continue to engage. I don't know, Amy, it's your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something that's staying with me around, you used the word earlier, Bev, honouring, but it wasn't in the same sentence. But there's something for me about honouring my past I as well, and it not being, oh, well, that's how I used to be. Which is something that initially in this co-creative space I really struggled with. Oh, well, you know, if it's past, it's got to be bad because that's an old pattern of relating. But that sense of honouring,
compassion as well as honouring, I think. Compassion comes in. Compassion towards yourself feels like a really big part of it, because even though you're noticing that past I and you know, it's not coming through with a critical voice attached to it. It's not, you're not giving yourself a hard time for that past I. It's being able to see it and still feel gentle and kind and towards yourself, and know that there's things you want to do differently and move into the present. So
yeah,
it is. It really is.
Can I add a bit?
Go for it, Paul.
Since when do you need permission, Paul?
Yeah, well, I'm just conscious that I've joined halfway through. But I mean, what I'm thinking about is Adrian Lee's diagram about rackets and reinforcing memories. And what Serena and Claire were talking about was they're coming in with, as you've said, a past I and a pattern, defensive pattern. You've had the courage to go beyond that and bring it into the present or do something different, and it sort of enjoyed it, or it's been all right, and you're going away with, oh, I did that. And Adrian Lee talks about it when we challenge those old rackets, those old patterns, and we get a good experience, we start we change the reinforcing memories from the old racket and begin to generate a different pattern, that maybe begins to support a positive part of our script, about us being okay, or about us. It's all, you know, we can speak, you know, people do listen if we say something, and it also begins to reinforce a different sort of a positive type script, belief, which we all will have, when we do that challenge and get a good response or a good outcome, it sort of begins to quieten some of the negative rackets and support some of the more positive aspects of our script.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm thinking about, as you say that, the role of the intersubjective space in that is clear, isn't it? Because it's like that when you take that self into the space with others and it's met in that way, that's part of the transformation, isn't it?
It's almost like a re-imaging. It sounds like a re-imaging because you see something else mirrored back in the space, in the subjective space.
And of course, it depends on the response you get.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
For me, it's also hearing you about this. It's part of the racketeering, the negative loops that were keeping us in script were also not helpful because they were keeping us away from the intersubjective space. They were keeping us away from the relationship. So the positive way of being, the alternative, is not only a positive process, but it's also an entryway to the intersubjective space where we find our desires or needs or what we strive for. So for me, that's very different compared to anything that we were looking for in a more scripty way of looking at things, because there was nothing there. It can only be in the intersubjective space that's created. And I think Bev and James, we were talking about this actually, during the breakout room among the three of us, the importance of the relationship, the importance of that space to heal.
Yeah. But it's also being met, isn't it? Because the various of you have spoken, you can get met in this space, and providing you're met in that way that can reflect back to you who you are, that will strengthen and give you a different message that maybe that you might have got from a scripty place where you were met.
Yeah.
Or not met, and that's challenging.
Well, that's right.
Or to be to have something else about you that you deny about yourself mirrored back. So it kind of creates that tension. But if you are more willing to stay in the present I, or hold the tension between past and present I, then that can be changed.
Yeah, but it's in that intersubjective space that there are possibilities that it can then be done in a different way.
It's almost like the way is through the winners and in the winners. That's why it's, I love this principle of co-creative TA. That's, I wouldn't say that's the path, because there's no one single path, but that's where you find it.
Yeah, the we-ness.
Okay. What comes up when for others from the breakout room, from what you're hearing now?
Frederick is just saying he's.
Freddie needs to go. Bye, Freddie.
Bye, Freddie.
Take care. Good to see you.
Bye, Freddie.
Yeah. Bye.
So sorry to say something stupid, but when you talk about intersubjectivity in TA, do you mean that the practitioner should interact much more with the client?
Well,
as it used to be, because apparently Freud was interacting a lot with his clients and even eating with them, feeding them during the sessions. I would love that.
What do you think, Anne?
What I am thinking, I don't know, maybe. So I don't know if you think of that, or if you think that groups would be more beneficial, or for, I don't know, because apparently Eric Byrne was working quite a lot in groups, and apparently it was a lot out of it. And I can notice in my job, which is working with students or children, that it's very efficient to work in groups, or even in my TA training sessions. Yeah, so yeah, I wonder what you think of exactly. How do you think intersubjectivity can reveal itself the best?
Well, so there's something that's coming to my mind, Anne, as you were asking that question, and in relation to thinking about this, the idea of intersubjectivity theoretically. And I don't know, is anybody here familiar with the idea of the third, the idea of the third in therapy or in encounter? And it can be quite a psychoanalytic idea, but there's a writer called Jessica Benjamin who talks about this much more in a much more down-to-earth way. And the third is something that emerges in the space between two people. So it could be fantasies that we have, images that come to mind, sort of something that starts to happen. And traditionally, this was thought to be in the mind of the therapist, of the analyst, that they would use. So Tudor and Summers in the co-creative approach are taking that into a two-way process. And then the third thing is that thing between us that, and we can make use of it. And how do we make use of it? Like it's something where we meet, and we can it's so sort of like relational possibilities open up if we are willing to let go of I'm me, you're you. Well, we are, but then what about this bit in the middle? And it's that for me is the third. And the third thing is to me, it's the connection. And we can choose to use the connection, work with the connection, the quality of it, what it feels like, what's happening, or not.
Is that like the partial transference, Bev, that you're talking about? When one of us is...
Well, I think it absolutely could be, couldn't it? The diamond. Have we got that, Traian? Have we got a picture of that?
Handout at the beginning.
Okay, should we just have a quick look at it?
Yeah, sounds a good idea.
Sure. Here it is.
So I think this is what you're referring to, isn't it, Amy? And
yeah,
I don't know, probably everybody uses it sort of differently, really. I like to put it on the floor when I'm talking to people and have this idea of stepping. So stepping between past I and present I. And there's something really special about what's happening as I'm stepping, what's in the space between past I and present I, and past you and present you. And what's happening then? And how do we make use of that? I'm just throwing in an idea here. It's what's coming to mind, like what, it'd be great if someone picks it up. Does it have any meaning or not? Or
well, for me, that's about where we do the learning, isn't it? It's about where we get in contact with our perhaps old patterns that, that are producing feelings or behaviors that we're not that happy about. And it opens the way up for processing.
Yeah.
Therefore, it changes, I think, going back to Anne's question, it changes the quality of relating. It isn't so much how much or how little, it's a different quality of relating. Because
okay. Oh, would you try to stop the share trial? Will you say more about that, James?
Well, it comes to placing the emphasis, if we're talking about therapy, well, I don't think it matters. I think it applies to all fields, really. It's about emphasizing that there's two of us in the room and both of our subjectivities need to be honored and brought into the room and worked with. And that it isn't that there's one person who's powerful who then dictates what happens. And so that's moving very much to, it's changing the power dynamic. And so I think that changes the quality of the work. Now, of course, we can all get up to things around the power dynamic and we can slip into past I in terms of how we manage powerful figures. But of course, that slipping into past I is how we work, because that then becomes part of what we're going to do in the room or in the group, whether it's an organizational group, an educational group, counseling, psychotherapy group. So for me, it's very much about the quality of the work, and it's to do with how much importance we place on our own and the subjectivity of the other. Does that in any way?
Well,
Anne?
I'm going back to Laura's sharing, where I wonder if there was, so it's like you had a process, Laura, where you had a feeling of past I think, and then you pushed through it. And I suppose it feels like there's a space between past I and present I, a moment maybe, where you make a choice, would you say?
Yeah, I think, what you're saying about the power dynamic, it felt, because I had a similar transference as what Serena said about experience. It's like, oh shit, I'm training. I'm just finishing training and there's all these other people with, so I think it felt like a decision. Yeah, it felt like initially it felt like the power was with you as the group and as the facilitators. And then it then felt like a shift in dynamic where I made a decision and therefore the power was equal, and the I'm okay, you're okay, that power felt the same. Yeah, and that was the shift.
Nice. And that links to what Paul was saying then about transformation.
Yeah. So you took your power back.
I was wondering how this whole concept of intersubjectivity relates to a relational approach or a mentalization approach. I know that's taking into a theoretical subjective domain, but I just can't quite work out what this is that we're talking about that's different here. And as I listen to people, it does sound like it's more the immediate experience of what's going on for them. So perhaps that taps in a little bit to what Anne was saying about more of an action focus to what this is that we're talking about. But I'm flipping in and out of quite getting it or not getting it.
Okay, well, I've got an idea, Mary, that I can share with you, and we'll see what James and Traian think as well. So in the TA world, of course, we've got the relational school, haven't we? And I think we need to add a word to that. I think we need to add relational psychodynamic, because it is very much based on psychodynamic theory. And then we've got relational co-creative. And so if I'm using the intersubjective space in a relational psychodynamic way, I might be, for instance, monitoring the transference and noticing what gets invited in me, using that information to inform me, and then maybe deciding how to use it. I might not use it this session. I might wait and see what happens. I might work out what's being encoded. But notice that in that process, I'm doing something. I think in a relational co-creative use of the intersubjective space, much sooner I would talk about what I'm noticing. Does that make sense, Mary?
Yes.
And, well, I think it's more, does it answer your question? Let me say it that way. Does it begin to even?
It does. I mean, it's quite a helpful distinction. I think I'm slightly clearer now in that domain, but still that noticing process is very much the concept coming out of mindfulness and mentalization processes as well. So again, I'm just wondering what delineates this separately from that.
Well, okay, I can give you another idea of how to delineate it. That effectively, I guess, I'm looking for both my physis and the client's physis to drive the change. So my role isn't to get up to something in the therapy that I think is going to work, but my way is to relate empathically. Empathic transactional relating is what Keith Tudor calls it, in a way that will enable my client's physis to develop and grow, so they change. So the emphasis moves from what the therapist is up to what the client is up to, or the trainee, or the supervisee, or in any other domain where I choose to work in this way. And it's a very different way of working, which is really sort of enlarging a bit on what I said about the quality of the interaction. Not that it's better quality, but it's different.
I think, Bev, when you talked about noticing it, and it's something that you picked up, Mary, that I think in both co-creative TA and relational TA, we notice. It's what we then do with that noticing. So, and Bev and I have had some discussions about transferences and how we use them. And I think where we got to was in a relational space, you work in the transference, whereas in a co-creative space, you work with the transference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that for me, when Bev and myself were talking it through, that really made it clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
That in a co-creative space, we share the transferences as the supervisor or the therapist or the educationalist or whatever. We don't keep it out to ourselves because we put it into the intersubjective space, and that impacts on the intersubjective space. So and by putting it in there, we are being present-centered.
Yeah.
And sharing the responsibility for the intersubjective space and inviting we-ness and doing it with positive regard. So we're not being defensive.
Yeah, I like it. That does capture something, Paul. I think Amy's waiting to say something.
Yeah, bursting to say something. I think I might have just given myself a permission. So, Bev, when you were saying about we might talk about it sooner in co-creative, as I'm listening back to all my tapes and thinking, it's messier because it comes in sooner and then it's worked out between us about what's going on. It feels messier.
Yes.
Whereas the bit where we what did you say? But when, if you're working in it, or if you're thinking about when to use it, or you're planning when to use it, it's almost sorted already. So I'm taking a permission that it's okay that when I listen back to it, it's not always sorted. That's why, because we're working it out between us.
Exactly. And it is absolutely, and it's a whole load of bollocks when, this whole thing about, well, no, but we can't introduce it too quickly. I mean, what's that? If we have assessed that someone got enough adult ego state to enter into psychotherapy, they can think about these things with us.
Yes.
It's absolutely possible. And it gets beyond being a doer and a done to.
Yes.
And the sharedness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add something to it, not that much touching on the transferring bit, but for me, there's a different quality of the emerging process between the two. There is a slight limitation when I'm waiting for something, or I'm stopping something, or I'm holding on, because I'm actually influencing, the freedom of things to emerge. So, to give an example from perhaps an organizational setting, if I'm already having a predetermined idea of how things should be, that will do something to how we are together. It's not going to be a default bad, but it does something to the potency of the emergence in a way. For me, that's very different between the two approaches somehow. I'm not looking for something. I'm being together with the other one, looking at what emerges.
Yeah, because as soon as you start looking for it, you lose them.
Yeah, that's for me a key difference.
Right.
And I think the other is also incredibly tuned in to what's going on, and in a non-conscious way will perceive what we're, we as therapists or trainers or whatever might be up to. So they will suss out what's going on, because our little professors can be very, very skilled at this.
Yeah.
And then behave as if that's true.
Then
behave as if that's true. And there was all the transference again.
Yeah, that's right.
And the therapist or the supervisor is not the only one picking up transferences.
Yeah.
No, absolutely right.
Yeah.
And what are we afraid of if we're saying that we can't also be interested in our own past I in the encounter with a client?
Yeah, and I don't know whether Byrne would ever agree or not, but he was very into, there's no point in writing any notes unless you're willing to share them with the client, which was about open communication. So this touches really on the heart of our philosophy, which is open communication.
We do get transformed by our clients.
Yeah, for sure we do.
Alan has to go.
Bye, Alan.
Bye, Alan.
Oh, bye.
See you, Alan.
Good to have you.
Yeah, bye.
There's something that's I realize it's on my mind and I wanted to share it with the group, which is we were talking about the relationship in the tunas, and in group settings, you were talking about the third, Bev, and in group settings, there is a need for a common willingness and desire to step into for that. I wouldn't call it the third, but I would call it, the common character somehow. Even that is limiting. That depends on each and every one of us to emerge, and that facilitates that intersubjective space where you know, things that we strive for so much, like trust and safety and coming together and working towards a common purpose, then you know, work so seamlessly towards. So for me, what's key and what I very much aspire to is, how can we all be part of this co-creation? Because the challenging bit is that it's only available when we work together. If one of us doesn't, it does something to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something very special when we do get into that space, because we actually can function from a perspective of knowing the minds of many people. You know, it's quite transcendent, really, in the sense that we're suddenly not an individual. We're actually somebody who shares the minds of other people, and it gives you all those other perspectives with which to meet life. It's a very different way of being if you can let yourself be present there.
Yeah.
And there is something which I do think is different, perhaps potentially from, you know, psychotherapy or organizational settings. You know, as we come together to get work done, whatever that work might be, that will shape up differently when we come from that place, or when we work from that place. And hearing myself say that, I think it equally applies actually to any setting. So
it's almost a sense you can't do the work until you do that processing. And when you've done that processing, the work becomes easy.
Yeah.
What's coming to my mind is the challenge of sometimes being confronted by difference, and to what extent I'm prepared to allow that to influence me and to become mutual.
Isn't it? Go ahead, Bev.
Oh,
Go.
I'll leave it there. You pick it up.
Yeah, it's the way it comes. It's what am I willing to let go for it to become. And when we say, you know, willing to let go, for it can feel scary and losing a bit of ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I might not want to.
Yeah. And for me, that's the tension between autonomy and homonomy.
Yeah.
And it's
You know, like, will I lose me if I let you in?
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
Sorry.
I was going to say that's interesting in itself, isn't it? That the me exists in the relational, that the connectivity is between we and the we-ness, and yet the defensiveness is in there. But what about me?
It is.
And maybe that's how we have been socialized over time. The me-ness.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a difference between present I and present me.
Say more there, Paul.
Well, Bev's talked about me giving some of me up, and co-creative TA talks about I rather than me.
Feels different.
I think me is more personal.
Yeah, it is.
So
it seems to have more defenses around it.
Yeah, maybe we can be present I and not completely present me.
Yeah.
Just amusing, you know, because it's everyone.
That's what we're doing. We need to muse.
Yeah, that's picking up something that you said, Bev, and I don't know whether it was in the group. It wasn't in the group, but it was about the difference between seeing others as subjective or objectifying others. And I wonder whether when it's present me, there's an objectification of me. I don't know. And I just throw that out as just a zany thought off the top of my head.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah. What's, you know, I mean, obviously I'm talking and this is me, being me here. If I give up, I don't know, something like what will happen if I bring something forth of me? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we're back to that risk thing.
Yeah.
Vulnerability.
Yeah.
And there isn't a should there.
You know what? If we're willing to step into the intersubjective space and we have a positive experience that in the future turns into a past type positive one, to Paul's point earlier, that's a different me, an enriched me. So it's almost like believing, like Claude Steiner was talking about, the stroke economy. You know, we believe in the limits of it. So not willing to step into perhaps could be fostered by the thought that stepping into might make a better me in the future. So is it actually that limited in a way? And we had this example, I think you had it, Amy, when you said, oh, this time around was different. Because there was something that you picked up from previous experiences, which is still you, but there is a different you because of the willingness that you had at one point. So for me, that doesn't create that's enriching for both the group and the individual. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I guess if we hang on to me too tightly, we give up the possibilities of change.
And which me?
And
which me in relation to you, to this group, to my partner when I go home? I'm a different me in different spaces.
Yeah.
Something else is brought forward.
Yeah. I resonate a lot with what you're saying. That it touches me because I think it's that really allowing for the emergence to be truly healing somehow. We do not know. We don't know.
Isn't that part of that co-creativity, that we let go of certainty, or the idea that there is certainty?
Yeah.
Whereas the me has some certainty.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm thinking about something that Jessica Benjamin says in her book about intersubjectivity, the confusing traffic of the two-way street, that speaks to something of the mess of the co-creative and the intersubjective. you know, we need to be willing to go into the sort of hurly-burly of it in a way, because it can be like that. And
yeah,
I was just thinking that for me, I also need to, and I don't know what you're going to make of this, but I also need to step out of it at times and to think about it on my own, and then come back in.
But I think there's a permission, I think, isn't there, for us to look after ourselves and care for ourselves. And we may need to do that. Because when I said that earlier, that there isn't a should here, there isn't a should that we have to turn up and bare our souls, whatever. Because that's just downright scary and frightening and not something I'd want to do. So it's really important that we care for ourselves in this space.
Maybe that's the difference between we-ness and the symbiotic we-ness that we started talking about. If we always have to do that, then there's something else in play.
Yeah, that's true.
So yes, so I think what's emerged for me as we've taught, and this is a bit of a new thing for me, is something about the value of restoring in me-ness and then coming back into we-ness, and the other way around as well, probably. Yeah, because there is that, you know, we've referred to it 2 or 3 times, that paradoxical balance between autonomy and homonomy. Yeah.
Homonomy being our need for relationship, and there is a I think there's a toing and froing with it.
Yeah.
It needs to be, and we need to find ourselves in that place that we have these two quite conflicting needs.
Yeah, because I after this experience today, we've all taught, I will go and process it with me. And then I'll probably bring it back into we as well.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah.
As you would have done yesterday.
Yeah.
So
it's 7:20.
I know. I'm conscious of that.
Gosh. Oh.
Time flies when you're in the intersubjective space.
I thought, oh.
Well, it's
yeah.
true. I mean, remember James, Bev, and Paul. So we're a group of 6. You know, how many hours did we spend? How many days flew by?
Yeah.
Without knowing and realizing. So I confirm that feeling.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful experience to me. You can't really explain it till you do it. You can talk about it, but while you're talking about it, you're doing it.
So I wonder if anyone would like to share what it's been like for them this evening.
I don't mind sharing. So for me, I think I feel like there has been a shift. It's hard to sort of like what you were saying, Bev. It's hard to put words to it, which is quite interesting. And I think for me, I'm thinking of a client I'm working with, and that element of risk. And there's a dynamic in our relationship that I have been pushing and pulling around this, taking a risk with something, and And after this, it's given me the permission to take the risk. And I think, and I felt, yeah, I did feel, and I do feel that once I've taken the risk, nothing like ethical, no ethical worries. But once I've taken that risk, I feel like I do have a sense that it will get beneath and I'll meet the authentic self. Actually, I had this sense, so it's given me a big permission to go for it. Yeah, so thank you. And I just want to check out, there's I'm sharing in a group, it's really weird timing, but yesterday I was drawing this like diagram a lot. I don't know why, it just kept coming to me, and I might have read it somewhere, but I wanted to check it out because it seems like it's like linked to this and where it is. I didn't draw it before with the we, you and us. I just had it as the two circles crossing over. But I don't know if it's in any theory somewhere, or it's just really weird timing because yeah, I was drawing it a lot over a whole page yesterday, and then obviously today I'm like, that's that.
Well, maybe
reference merging.
Did you create that, Laura?
I don't know. That's what I want to check out if anyone knows where that is.
Yeah, I've seen it with in our training.
Have you?
Yeah. That's how, like I think it was just in our notes, from the weekend. I remember, I think Susie drew it up as, I've definitely seen that, because that's how I kind of imagine it. It's like where the two kind of consciousness meet.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the merging.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice diagram.
I love the synchronicity of that. There's something you've been thinking of, and then it emerges in this space.
Yeah.
Actually, it seems that it's all about connection and being present and being caring for the others.
Yeah, that's a lovely resume.
Traian talked about authenticity as a co-creative process, and that's got me thinking a lot. It's been really interesting, this whole session. It's I was unclear about the difference between intersubjective space and relational space, and I'm beginning to understand now the difference. And there are a lot of takeaways. I mean, they're buzzing around in my head at the moment. So thanks everyone for sharing. Really interesting.
Jenny.
I've got a feeling after each session, I maybe check out with the same thing, which is that I'm going away with a permission. Lucky for me, it appears so far to be a different permission every time. But something that's rolling around my head at the moment is I guess I struggle with that autonomy and homonymy. And as you were speaking, Traian, I thought, I wonder if for me, I get around that by thinking of agency as opposed to autonomy. Moving away from that sense of the culture of autonomy of the Western versus other. So I'm left with that ponderance. And thanks all.
Okay.
I think it's been really helpful for me, the people that have shared, because then that gave me permission to then go, okay, yeah, I can talk about my experience here too. So thank you for you all for sharing.
My checkout is I'm leaving feeling emotional that during the whole lockdown processes, I've lost a lot of my groups, and how lovely it is to talk about something that I love in a TA way. that I've missed that. And it, even though my head's fried now, I want to carry on.
Yeah.
It's almost like, because it's energizing. There's something about it. There's a difference in this style of learning.
Yeah.
That the co-creativity is also energizing. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Lovely. We can learn like this.
Yeah. I sometimes feel sad that the learning sometimes is so individual. It's so much from that individual paradigm. You know, I want to do my training again and do it from a co-creative perspective and see how different that would be. I mean, I'm not going to do that. But.
Yeah, and I guess
individual. Go ahead, James.
I'll finish.
The individual learning can be so individual even when we're in groups.
Yeah.
That's the sad part of it.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I just think the learning's so much richer in groups because we've all got something to contribute.
Well, when we enter into groupness, yeah.
Yeah, and that's accepting that it might be messy too.
Yeah, it will.
I loved working, if that's a word, being co-facilitating Bev and James with you two, because it is the first time.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you. And thank you for the willingness to co-create, because it takes a bit of us all, as we were just talking about.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed tonight. It's been really great hearing you contribute and take part. It's been really rich.
Thank you.
So I would say, well, good night or good evening or good afternoon, depending where we all are. And see you next time, whatever that might be.
We need to have the loss of ending.
Yeah.
That's another part of it.
Yeah.
Thanks to the three of you for holding the space.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.